it's a big story, and I will try not to make it big because sometimes I just get carried away in the details. But in a nutshell, I I moved to Vancouver when I was 21. I was fresh out of journalism school. I was pursuing a career in journalism. I got a job that just basically paid the bills, semi related to my schooling, and it was a storefront or a street front photo studio. In those days, you took your film into a place to get developed. And that's what I did. And it also had a studio in it. And basically, I tell you that because I was working alone and I was street front. And it wasn't in a mall. So the level of security is a little more lackadaisical, I guess. And a bad person who had this as his MO picked up on the fact that there was a girl working by herself. He had come into the store a few times. He had done his research unbeknownst to me. I was 21, naive. And at closing time, he came in and robbed me and further decided that that wasn't enough. And he took me with him to a camp that he had about 8 kilometers away in North Vancouver and kept me there for 9 days. And I literally disappeared without a trace. No cameras were in the studio recording. Nobody had dash cams, nothing. So I became a missing person for 9 days, and really that experience is embedded in my soul. So it was 33 years ago that it happened. So July 3rd to the 11th, 1992 was when it happened. And every year, as you're saying, oh, I do have the memory does come back, and there was times in my life where I wasn't acknowledging it, and I can look back and see how it still was there, which is pretty powerful for me. Yeah, about 9 years ago, I got really sick, and through a lot of struggle from a physical diagnosis with doctors and stuff, was thankfully connected to a very intelligent psychologist who saw this untreated PTSD. And that's pretty much brought me to seeing the power of an untold story inside of you, and connected the dots back to my need to be a storyteller and doing something that has positivity with this ugly memory that's in me. Shutting down. I shut down all my emotion. That's probably the one that saved me the most. Was I gave him, I never cried, I never laughed, I never got angry. I just would do what you need to do, and my goal is to go home. And he, on his end, he kept saying, he kept promising to let me go. It was the next day, the next day, the next day. So there was a weird symbiosis in me continuing believing that he was going to let me go, and continually trusting that, and not giving him the prey mindset that he needed. Was a predator. He needed someone to run and fight and have emotion. And I did recall how he kind of got nicer to me as the days went on, and he was, buying me things, a seafood dinner because he knew I liked seafood. So, and in the end, and I've talked to a friend about this the other day, at the very end, when he had taken another woman, and I could hear him beating her, I could hear them fighting, and I was tied and left in a different part that I couldn't see them. The last thing he said to me, like he didn't even have to say goodbye, and he came and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "The police are at the car. I'm on my way. I'm not going to hurt you anymore." I've never been angry at the bad guy necessarily. The nice thing about that situation, if that's a loose way to put it, is I didn't have a personal relationship with him, right? So I can easily put him into bad guy category and he doesn't affect me. And I guess that today has a lot of power to me because the majority of people who have been assaulted in a similar way have been assaulted by someone they know, and then that adds another piece to it. And I think that also is tied into the fact that he was caught right away. Within 24 hours of my rescue, he was caught, and that's another significant level of closure. How do you live with carrying something? Because you will never erase it. Traumatic events have a physiologic, like they have a rewiring, I guess, in my non-expert verbiage. They have a way of rewiring you and figuring out what that means to you as part of it. And that's been, that's my story anyway, or how I see it. An example would be, and it changes depending on what I'm doing in my life, where I'm at with maybe other stresses, work, relationships, or what have you. I will say that an example was back in around 2015, 2016, where I feel that everything really heavily began to manifest was I was in extreme physical pain, and these pains would come up out of nowhere. And back pain in particular, lower back pain, shoulder pain. I was at the chiropractor like twice a week. I was at massage 2 to 3 times a month, was at my job asking for supports with ergonomics and how I was sitting. And I wasn't getting to the problem, because some days it was terrible and some days it wasn't so terrible. And other things, like I had, eczema, my hands looked like they were inside out. But yeah, I still was functioning. I still could go to work. I still could essentially take care of my daughter. I still was trying to function. But stomach issues was the big thing that started to really pose a significant challenge. And I wasn't getting any answers other than this heavy duty medication. And I went to get further answers to a naturopath, and this wonderful woman who I'd never met before, within the first time of seeing her, she was from Iran originally. And so she really just, to me, had a bigger picture understanding of medicine. Not that I necessarily thought that at the time, but she asked questions that others in my medical experiences hadn't. And when she looked at my hands and the eczema, and we're talking about my stomach and this intense shoulder pain that I was getting as well. And she was the first person to ask the question of, when was the first time you felt that pain in your shoulders? Just that one question took me back to being in the woods 20 years ago, and being the way, not to get graphic too much, but the way I was restrained a lot of the time was being hogtied. And when you're hogtied, your hands are behind your back. You're just backwards and you're tied, and it's not humane. And it had an impact on me then, but my body remembered that. Wow. When my stress levels hit their maximum over 20 years later. And that, to me, once I understood that, just from that question, and we got open that conversation, I can honestly say that shoulder pain has never come back to that degree again. And I haven't done any additional treatments. It just was having a mental understanding of it, of its source. As I said, it kind of, once I understood that, it took me to a deeper level of peace in seeing the source and seeing that I wasn't I wasn't going, I wasn't going crazy,
Right.
and that these physical symptoms there possibly could be a solution. But this was also before I saw the psychologist. So
Right.
it was a step. It was like a teeny little layer off of this onion.
Right.
um, but I mean, in terms of answering where I was at, I mean, that time of my life was everything was affected. My marriage was a mess. My job was incredibly toxic. Did my mental state contribute to that? Probably. Was my job toxic and was my marriage a mess, regardless of where my mental state was? Yes. So we can't isolate in our lives, right? But unless we own who we are or understand who we are, we have the risk of putting ourselves into this place of just chaos. And that's where I was. And my body was telling me so. My body was desperately needing me um, to get into that story or figure out what was going on psychologically. That's how I took it anyway. But out of the blue, the OPP, the sergeant called me and he said he wanted me to know before the media released it. And I thought that was amazing because, I mean, honestly, it has come out and the media is not interested in talking to me at all. And that's fine too. But, he made a point of letting me know. And yeah, so I guess I don't know all the details, but to the best of my knowledge, in a nutshell, they have enough evidence to take him to trial for a murder that happened in 1891. She was a 40-year-old woman. Her name was Angeline Quinnell. And that's the name that I want people to know. When I found that out, when the police talked to me, it was just a week before my anniversary time. So I was in the mindset of thinking about it, but it just brought me to a very sad place. Becoming a mother took me down to the lowest psychological place I've been, cracked me wide open, but also allowed me to properly live my life. And she's both brought me down and she saved me. This little female person brought me back to that broken female person inside of me that I hadn't dealt with yet. And that's what I'm still doing to this day. Just the whole process of owning the status of that in my life has saved my life, because it allows me to be I see how I'm indirectly and of course directly through my actions and words affecting my child. And maybe if I didn't have someone to be responsible for, I would still be escaping. And I think I'd be a lot sicker, because I was heading down a path and ignoring a lot of things. I call it owning my story. And again, as a writer at heart, it is probably one of the most powerful forms of connection for me anyway. So going through and talking through those 9 days and making it part of what I'm choosing as part of my profession now, bringing that into my entire world has saved my life. That's why my podcast is called Stand Up 8, because it's fall down 7 times, stand up 8. Because that was in my TED Talk. That's what I wanted to do, is take something that like a horrific story. I don't want to get up there and be like, here's some nitty gritty horrible details. And some people will be, I mean, probably it would get more views because of that, right? But that's not the point. So in the TED Talk, I if there was an advice piece of it, like, we have to trust that tomorrow will be a better day. And maybe it won't be, but maybe the next one will. And over the 9 days that I was out there, that's what kept me going. I had to trust that the next day would be a better day. By telling it, it helps others see it within themselves, because we're all surviving some bad guy in some way, typically. And that's the clearest path you'll have to succeeding in this crazy world that is life, I guess.